The silent vigil. The Galactic Assembly's Grand Chamber hadn't seen such chaos in over 3 centuries. Representatives from 1,000 worlds crowded the spiral tiers, their voices blending into a cacophony of fear and disbelief. At the center of the storm stood First Speaker Zara Val, her crystalline form refracting the chamber's light into prismatic patterns that danced across the walls. "Order," she commanded, her harmonics cutting through the din. "We must maintain order." The reason for their distress hung in the air above them, a holographic projection of what should have been empty space. Instead, it showed a vast network of structures orbiting a seemingly unremarkable star, Sol, human space. The sector had been quarantined for 300 years, ever since the species had nearly destroyed themselves in what the Assembly's records called the Great Burning. "These readings cannot be accurate," declared Ambassador Krell of the Centaurian Collective, his feathered crest bristling. "No civilization could advance this rapidly. Not after what they did to their homeworld." Zara's crystalline fingers traced patterns in the air, enhancing portions of the hologram. "The data has been verified by 3 independent survey ships. What you see is real. The humans didn't destroy themselves as we assumed. They rebuilt. In silence. In secret." The images shifted, showing massive orbital habitats, shipyards stretching thousands of kilometers, and defense platforms that made the Assembly's most advanced weaponry look primitive by comparison. But most disturbing was what the survey ships hadn't found. No transmissions, no waste energy, no signs of the chaos that usually accompanied such massive construction efforts. Just precise, purposeful efficiency. How did we miss this? The question came from General Voss, the Assembly's military advisor. His exoskeleton clicked nervously as he studied the projections. "Our monitoring stations should have detected something. They were designed to look for what we expected to find," Zara replied. "Signs of recovery using known technological paths. Instead, the humans took roads we never imagined existed." The chamber fell silent as a new image appeared. A single human vessel, encountered at the edge of their space. Its design defied conventional physics, its hull seeming to bend light around it. The survey ship that recorded it reported that its sensors couldn't properly track the vessel. It was there, yet somehow not there. 3 days ago," Zara continued, "they sent us this." The message was simple, text only, broadcast simultaneously to every major communication hub in the galaxy. "The quarantine ends. We are ready to rejoin the galactic community. Your representatives will be welcome at the coordinates provided. Choose them wisely." "It's a trap," Krell declared. "They blame us for abandoning them during the Great Burning. This is their revenge." "If they wanted revenge," General Voss interjected, "they wouldn't have announced themselves. They would have struck while we were ignorant of their capabilities." Zara raised her hand, silencing the brewing argument. "Whatever their intentions, we cannot ignore this invitation. The humans have achieved this level of advancement in isolation. Imagine what they might do if they feel threatened." The Assembly spent hours debating who would go. In the end, they chose 3 representatives. Zara herself, for her diplomatic skills. Dr. Ixel, the Assembly's foremost xenotechnologist, and surprisingly, junior diplomat Talon Reed, whose specialty was studying human history from before the Great Burning. As their ship approached the provided coordinates, they found themselves facing a structure that challenged their understanding of engineering. A station hung in space, its surface a constantly shifting geometric pattern that seemed to fold in on itself endlessly. No visible means of propulsion kept it in place, yet it maintained perfect position. Their ship was guided into a docking bay that appeared to materialize out of the flowing patterns of the station's hull. As they stepped onto the station, they were met not by guards or diplomats, but by a single human woman. She was tall, with dark skin and silver hair that seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. "Welcome to Nexus Station," she said, her voice carrying both warmth and authority. "I am Director Sarah Chen of the Human Confederation. We have much to discuss." The human led them through corridors that shifted and changed as they walked, yet somehow always felt natural and intuitive to navigate. Dr. Ixel's sensors worked overtime, trying to understand the technology surrounding them. How? He finally burst out, his professional composure cracking. How did you achieve all this? Sarah smiled, but there was a hint of sadness in her expression. The Great Burning taught us many things, Doctor. Chief among them was that our greatest enemy was our own nature, our tendency to let our technology outpace our wisdom. So we didn't just rebuild. We reimagined. We asked not what we could do, but what we should do. They entered a conference room that offered a stunning view of Earth. The planet bore little resemblance to the scared world of 3 centuries ago. The continents were a tapestry of green and silver, the oceans a deeper blue than any natural process could explain. The quarantine. Zara began carefully. We thought it was a punishment, a way to contain a dangerous species until they either perished or learned better. We know, Sarah replied. And in a way, you did us a favor. Isolation forced us to look inward, to solve our problems without external influences. Every advancement you see around you came from that introspection. And now, Talon Reed spoke for the first time, his historian's curiosity evident. Why reveal yourselves now? Sarah's expression grew serious. Because the galaxy is changing. We've been watching. The old powers are failing. New threats are emerging. The Assembly's influence wanes while chaos grows. We could remain in isolation, safe behind our walls of advanced technology. But that's not who we are anymore. She gestured, and a hologram appeared showing various crisis points across the galaxy. Failing ecosystems, dying stars, civilizations on the brink of collapse. We're not here to conquer or to seek revenge, Sarah continued. We're here to help, but on our terms. The old ways of the Assembly, the politics, the power games, the exploitation of younger races, that must end. We're offering partnership, but only if you're willing to change. The 3 representatives exchanged glances. In that moment, they understood that this wasn't just first contact with a reformed humanity. This was the beginning of a new era for the galaxy. The Assembly will resist, Zara warned. Change doesn't come easily to institutions that old. Sarah's smile returned, but this time there was a glint of steel behind it. We know. That's why we waited until we were ready. The question isn't whether the Assembly will accept change. The question is whether they'll help shape it or be shaped by it. As their meeting concluded, the representatives returned to their ship with more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. Humanity had not just survived the Great Burning. They had transcended it, and now the galaxy would never be the same. Steel and starlight. Admiral Kexry of the Assembly Defense Fleet had never felt so insignificant. His flagship, the Pride of Centaurus, was considered one of the most advanced vessels in known space. Yet as he watched the demonstration before him, he realized just how far behind they truly were. The human vessel. They called it a lightweaver, moved like nothing he had ever seen. It didn't so much fly through space as it seemed to whisper through it, leaving no wake, no energy signature, nothing that his most sophisticated sensors could track consistently. One moment it was there, the next it seemed to fade like a dream, only to reappear elsewhere. Impossible, muttered his science officer, Venta, her compound eyes rapidly shifting as she tried to process the data streaming across her screens. They're not using any known form of propulsion. It's as if they're suggesting to space itself where they'd like to be. The demonstration had been arranged at the Assembly's request. After the initial diplomatic contact, dozens of member species had demanded proof of humanity's capabilities. They had expected displays of weapons, of destructive power. Instead, the humans were showing them something far more profound: mastery over the fundamental forces of the universe itself. Commander Julia Santos of the Earth vessel stood on her bridge, watching the Assembly ship with a mixture of sympathy and amusement. They're still trying to analyze us with conventional sensors, she said to her XO, David Chen. Should we show them something really interesting? David nodded, a slight smile playing at his corners of his mouth. Try not to frighten them too much. Julia's fingers danced across the control interface, though interface was perhaps too crude a word for the neural-linked quantum field that surrounded her station. The Lightweaver responded instantly, its hull beginning to shimmer with patterns of light that seemed to fold in and out of reality. Aboard the Pride of Centaurus, alarms began blaring. Admiral, Venta called out, her voice tight with concern. The human vessel, it's everywhere. Our sensors are detecting it in multiple locations simultaneously. Kexri's facial tentacles writhed in confusion as he studied the tactical display. The single human ship had somehow split into a dozen identical vessels, each one as solid and real as the original. How are they doing this? They're not copies, Venta whispered. Quantum resonance readings suggest they're all the same ship, existing in multiple probabilistic states simultaneously. They've weaponized uncertainty itself. The demonstration continued for another hour, each display of technology more mind-bending than the last. The humans showed them ships that could heal themselves, energy fields that could redirect solar flares, and communication systems that operated instantaneously across any distance without any detectable medium of transmission. But it was what they didn't show that truly terrified the assembly observers. There were no planet-killing weapons, no swarms of autonomous war machines, none of the tools of conquest that advanced civilizations typically developed. The humans had seemingly skipped that entire phase of development, moving straight to something far more sophisticated. Later, in his private quarters, Admiral Kexri composed his report to the Assembly Council. His hands trembled slightly as he wrote, "What we have witnessed today goes beyond mere technological superiority. The humans haven't just advanced their technology. They've fundamentally altered their relationship with physical reality itself. They don't fight against the laws of nature. They've learned to dance with them." On Earth, in the gleaming spire of the Confederation Science Directory, Sarah Chen reviewed the data from the demonstration. "They're afraid," she noted to her colleague, Dr. James Martinez, the architect of many of their quantum engineering breakthroughs. "Of course they are," James replied, his dark eyes thoughtful. "We're showing them that everything they thought they knew about physics, about the possible and impossible, is just the beginning. That's terrifying. And necessary," Sarah added. "The Assembly needs to understand that the old paradigms won't work anymore. We can't afford another great burning, not on a galactic scale." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent communication. The Assembly had detected something approaching from intergalactic space, something massive, dark, and hungry. Early readings suggested it was larger than anything previously encountered, and it was headed straight for the galaxy's most populated sectors. "Well," Sarah said, studying the preliminary data, "it seems the universe has decided to accelerate our timetable." James nodded grimly. "Should we show them what we can really do?" "Not yet," Sarah replied. "First, let's see if they're ready to ask for help. Sometimes the hardest part of advancing isn't developing new technology. It's learning when and how to use it." As if in response to her words, the quantum communications array hummed to life. The Assembly was calling an emergency session, and for the first time in 3 centuries, humanity had been invited to attend not as observers, but as equals. The game was changing. The question was, could the Assembly change with it, or would their fear of humanity's advancement blind them to the greater threats that lurked in the darkness between the stars? Fragments of trust. The news of the approaching intergalactic threat spread through the galaxy like wildfire, and with it came change. In the shadows of massive assembly stations and on distant frontier worlds, representatives from dozens of smaller species began making their way to Earth. Each carried their people's hopes, fears, and centuries of resentment toward an assembly that had often ignored their needs. Ambassador Lyra Nix of the Human Diplomatic Corps watched as another ship docked at Luna Station. This one belonged to the Meridians, a species of bioluminescent beings who had been fighting for full assembly membership for over a century. Their vessel was old, patched together with parts from a dozen different civilizations, a telling sign of their status in galactic society. "That makes 17 delegations this week," noted her AI companion, Atlas, its holographic form shifting like Mercury beside her. "The Assembly won't be pleased." "The Assembly hasn't been pleased since we emerged from isolation," Lyra replied, straightening her formal uniform. "But they're not our primary concern right now." The Meridian delegation emerged from their ship, their bodies pulsing with patterns of light that conveyed their anxiety and hope. Lyra had studied their language of luminescence extensively. It was far more nuanced than the simplified version they used in assembly proceedings. "Welcome to Sol System," she greeted them in their light language, her uniform's smart fabric shifting colors to complement her words. The Meridian's glow patterns shifted to shock, then joy. Few non-Meridians had ever bothered to learn their true language. First speaker Lumina of the Meridians approached, her light patterns forming complex sentences. "We come seeking partnership, not charity. Our people have developed unique approaches to biological engineering, but the Assembly has always dismissed our contributions. Perhaps humanity will see value where they saw only primitive attempts at advancement." Meanwhile, in the Assembly's temporary emergency chamber on Centaurus Prime, the political situation was reaching a boiling point. First speaker Zora Val stood before the gathered representatives, her crystalline form rigid with tension. "We cannot ignore what's happening," she declared. "A third of our associate members have sent delegations to Earth in the past month alone. The power balance that has maintained peace for centuries is shifting." "Then we must act," thundered Representative Krell. "These lesser species seek to upset the natural order by allying with the humans. We should remind them of their place." Their place. The new voice belonged to Dr. James Martinez, Earth's scientific liaison to the Assembly. He had been quietly observing until now. "And who decided this natural order you speak of?" "The same Assembly that watched countless species struggle, offering help only when it served your interests." The chamber erupted in shouts and accusations, but James continued, his voice carrying over the chaos. "The threat approaching our galaxy doesn't care about your hierarchy. It will consume advanced and lesser species alike. Perhaps it's time to consider that the old order isn't equipped to face new challenges." Back on Luna Station, Lyra was concluding her meeting with the Meridians. Their proposal was fascinating. A synthesis of their biological engineering with human quantum technology that could revolutionize space travel. It was exactly the kind of collaboration humanity had hoped for. "There will be those who oppose this." Lumina's lights pulsed softly. "The Assembly's primary members have grown wealthy from controlling access to advanced technology. They won't willingly surrender that power." "Perhaps they won't have to," Lyra responded. "Humanity didn't emerge to replace the Assembly's authority, but to transform how the galaxy thinks about power itself." Her words were interrupted by an urgent message from Earth. The long-range quantum sensors had gathered more data about the approaching threat. It wasn't just massive. It was intelligent, and it was accelerating. In his private chamber on Centaurus Prime, Admiral Kexry studied the latest reports with growing dread. The Assembly's most powerful weapons would be useless against something of this scale. Their only hope lay with human technology. Technology they barely understood and deeply feared. "Pride comes before a fall," he muttered, remembering an old human saying he'd recently learned. The Assembly's pride had led them to quarantine humanity, to dismiss smaller species, to cling to power rather than embrace change. Now that pride might cost them everything. Sarah Chen sat in her office at the Confederation Science Directory, reviewing the stream of proposals and technological offerings from the various delegations. Some were primitive by human standards, others showed remarkable innovation despite limited resources. All of them represented potential. "They're not just coming to us for protection," she told Atlas, who had transferred its presence to her office. "They're coming because we're offering something the Assembly never did. The chance to contribute, to be valued for their unique perspectives. And if the Assembly sees this cooperation as a threat, Atlas asked. Sarah's expression hardened. Then they'll have to decide what's more important, maintaining their power or saving their galaxy. Because the shadow approaching us won't negotiate, won't respect their authority, and won't stop until it has consumed everything in its path. As if to emphasize her words, the quantum sensors pinged again. The entity had crossed another threshold, its speed increasing exponentially. They had weeks, not months, to prepare for its arrival. The assembly of species, great and small, would have to decide quickly, cling to the old ways and face extinction, or embrace a new paradigm of cooperation and face the darkness together. The fragments of trust being built now might be all that stood between civilization and oblivion. The precipice. The quantum sensors aboard Nexus Station pulsed with urgent warnings as Director Sarah Chen and her team analyzed the latest data. The intergalactic entity had crossed the galaxy's outer boundary, leaving a trail of dead stars in its wake. But it wasn't just its destructive power that terrified them. It was its intelligence. It was adapting, learning, evolving with each light year it traversed. It's not just consuming energy, Dr. James Martinez observed, his fingers dancing through holographic data streams. It's consuming information. The very physics of space is changing in its wake. In the Assembly's emergency chamber, the situation had devolved into chaos. Representative Krell and his allies had called for immediate military action, not against the approaching entity, but against Earth itself. We cannot allow the humans to gather more allies, Krell thundered. Every day, more species flock to their banner. The Assembly's authority crumbles while we debate. First speaker Zaraval's crystalline form pulsed with barely contained fury. And what would you have us do? Start a civil war while an extinction-level threat bears down upon us? The humans have offered to share their defensive technology. At what cost? Krell interrupted. They demand we restructure the entire galactic order. They would have us treat primitive species as equals. The chamber fell silent as Admiral Kexry stepped forward. The old warrior's tentacles were gray with fatigue, but his voice carried the weight of grim experience. I have seen their technology in action. I have studied their capabilities. If we move against Earth now, we will lose. Not just the battle, but everything. The humans don't need to fight us. They can simply step aside and let that thing in the void consume us all. On Luna Station, Ambassador Lyra Nix was coordinating the largest diplomatic effort in human history. Representatives from over 50 species had gathered, each bringing unique insights and technologies. The Meridian's biological engineering had proven revolutionary when combined with human quantum science. The crystalline arcsins, long dismissed by the Assembly as simple mineral life, had provided crucial breakthroughs in energy storage. This is what they feared, Lyra told Atlas as they watched teams of diverse species working together in the station's laboratories. Not our technology, but our willingness to share it, to learn from others, to grow together rather than rule alone. The station shuddered as another quantum pulse rippled through spacetime. The entity was getting closer, its hunger growing. Early projections suggested it could devour the entire galaxy in months. In her private quarters, Sarah Chen received an unexpected visitor. Admiral Kexry himself, coming not as an Assembly representative, but as a soldier who had seen too many wars. "You could have conquered us," he said without preamble, his translator struggling to convey the complex emotions in his native tongue. "When you emerged from isolation, you could have dominated the galaxy. Why didn't you?" Sarah's smile was tired but genuine. "Because that's not evolution, Admiral. Conquest, dominance, control, they're all patterns of the past. Humanity learned that the hard way during the Great Burning. True advancement comes from synthesis, from combining different perspectives to create something greater than the sum of its parts." Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent transmission. The entity had changed course, accelerating directly toward the most populous sector of Assembly space. It would reach the core worlds in days, not weeks as previously calculated. Commander Julia Santos stood on the bridge of her Lightweaver, now joined by ships from 24 species. Each vessel had been upgraded with a combination of human quantum technology and innovations from their own civilizations. They were faster, stronger, and more adaptable than anything the galaxy had seen before. The assembly fleet is holding position at the sector boundary, her XO reported. They're asking for instructions. Julia studied the tactical display, watching as the entity's massive form distorted space itself. Tell them to fall back to the secondary line. We'll need them when the time comes, but this first encounter must be handled precisely. On Centaurus Prime, Krell and his supporters had gathered their own fleet, determined to restore order to the galaxy. They might have succeeded in triggering a civil war, if not for what happened next. The entity struck its first major target, a massive assembly industrial world. The destruction was beyond anything they had imagined. It didn't just destroy the planet. It unraveled it, breaking down matter and energy into something that defied analysis. The death screams of billions echoed through quantum communication networks. In that moment, watching the horror unfold, even the most hardened assembly traditionalists realized the truth that humanity had been trying to teach them: survive together or perish alone. Sarah Chen stood before the combined fleets, assembly warships, human lightweavers, and vessels from dozens of lesser species, all linked by technology that represented the best of every civilization. "We have one chance," she announced, her words translated into hundreds of languages. "Not to defeat this entity. You can't defeat entropy itself. But we can change it, transform it, show it a different way to exist, just as we're learning to do ourselves." The entity loomed before them, a darkness that consumed light itself. But as the combined fleet moved into position, they carried with them something the galaxy had never truly seen before: unity born not of fear or dominance, but of choice and trust. The final battle for the galaxy's future was about to begin, and its outcome would depend not on weapons or technology alone, but on whether the assembled species could truly work as one. Dawn of unity. The combined fleet hung in space like a constellation of hope against the encroaching void. Ships of every design and origin had taken their positions according to a plan that merged assembly battle doctrine, human quantum theory, and tactical innovations from dozens of species. At the center of the formation, Commander Julia Santos felt the weight of history pressing down on her shoulders. "All ships reporting ready," Atlas announced, its presence shared across every vessel in the fleet. Quantum synchronization at optimal levels. The entity before them defied conventional description. It was darkness given form, hunger made manifest, a tear in the fabric of reality that consumed everything it touched. As they watched, it finished absorbing the remnants of the assembly industrial world, leaving nothing but emptiness behind. "Remember," Sarah Chen's voice echoed through the quantum network, "our goal isn't destruction. Traditional weapons would be useless anyway. We're here to communicate, to offer an alternative to consumption." The Meridian's bioships pulsed with patterns of light, their organic technology interfacing seamlessly with human quantum systems. The crystalline Arxen vessels resonated at frequencies that could alter the structure of spacetime itself. Even the assembly's massive warships had been modified, their conventional weapons replaced with devices that defied classical physics. First Speaker Zara Val, watching from the command center on Centaurus Prime, felt her crystalline form vibrate with tension. To think, she mused to Admiral Kexri, "A month ago, we were debating whether to treat humans as equals. Now the fate of the galaxy rests on their theory that this entity can be reasoned with." "Not just their theory," Kexri corrected. "Look at how each species' technology contributes to the whole. This plan wouldn't work without every piece." The entity seemed to sense their presence, its massive form shifting toward the fleet. The void grew deeper, hunger radiating across space like a physical force. Several ships reported their outer quantum fields beginning to degrade. All vessels, "Initiate primary sequence," Commander Santos ordered, just like we practiced. The fleet began to move in perfect synchronization, each ship adding its unique signature to a complex pattern. The Meridian's bioships released clouds of engineered particles that could survive in the quantum realm. Arcsin crystals amplified and shaped the emerging fields. Human lightweavers wove it all together into something entirely new. They weren't fighting. They were creating. The entity paused its advance, seeming to study the strange phenomenon forming before it. For the first time in its ancient existence, it encountered something it couldn't simply consume, a pattern of energy and matter that evolved as fast as it could be absorbed. In the heart of her lightweaver, Julia felt the ship's quantum systems merge with her consciousness. Through the fleet-wide network, she sensed the minds and spirits of thousands of beings working in harmony. Each brought their own perspective, their own understanding of reality, creating a gestalt that transcended individual limitations. "It's responding," Dr. James Martinez reported from his station on Luna. "The entity's quantum signature is shifting. It's learning." The void began to change. Where before there was only hunger, now there was curiosity. The darkness that consumed light began to refract it instead, creating patterns that mimicked those generated by the fleet. It was like watching a predator discover agriculture, the dawning realization that consumption wasn't the only path to survival. "By all the stars," Krell whispered from his flagship, his earlier belligerence forgotten in the face of what he was witnessing. "They're teaching it." The process took hours, each moment balanced on a knife's edge between success and catastrophic failure. The entity would advance, absorb, learn, then retreat and adjust. The fleet maintained their formation, their combined technology creating an ever-evolving dance of energy and information. Finally, as distant suns wheeled overhead, something remarkable happened. The entity began to create rather than consume. Its massive form shifted, transformed, became something that enhanced the space around it instead of devouring it. The void that had threatened to devour the galaxy became a cradle for new possibilities. In the aftermath, as ships began to stand down from their formation, Sarah Chen addressed the combined fleet. "What we've witnessed today isn't just the prevention of an apocalypse. It's proof of what humanity has believed since we emerged from our isolation, that the true power of advancement lies not in domination, but in transformation, not just of technology or physics, but of ourselves." The assembly chambers would never be the same. The old hierarchies had crumbled in the face of undeniable proof that cooperation yielded better results than competition. Species once dismissed as primitive were now recognized for their unique contributions to the galaxy's survival. Humanity had indeed changed the galaxy, but not through force or fear. They had done it by offering a hand to the overlooked, by sharing rather than hoarding knowledge, by proving that true strength comes from unity rather than dominance. On Luna Station, Ambassador Lyra Nix watched ships from 100 worlds come and go, carrying with them new technologies and ideas born from the unprecedented collaboration. The entity, now transformed, had taken up residence in intergalactic space, becoming a bridge between galaxies rather than a threat to them. "Was this your plan all along?" Atlas asked her, when humanity decided to emerge from isolation. Lyra smiled, watching as a Meridian bioship helped guide a newly arrived vessel from a species she didn't yet recognize. Not a plan, exactly. More of a hope. That when given the chance, different peoples wouldn't just coexist. They would create something greater together than any could achieve alone. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if reflecting the dawn of a new age. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not as conquerors or saviors, but as catalysts for change. They had shown the galaxy not just what they could do, but what everyone could become. And in the vast darkness between the stars, new lights were beginning to shine.